Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
All right, so my name is Mick Coyle. Mental Health Monday is back for another week. Each and every week on Radio City Talk, we focus on mental health and we talk about mental health matters at a local level, national level, international level. This week, we've got a local voice on who has gone international to, well, just the most incredible story. He's even written a book about it, and he's only, I think I'm right in saying, 21 years of age. Alex Staniforth joins us on the programme. Alex, it's great to get you on Mental Health Monday. Thank you for your time. You're 21, right?
That's right, Mick, yeah.
You've done some interesting things in your life, and you've had an interest in life. You've also had your own battles with mental health conditions. I just want to take you back, though, 4 years, because you ask yourself a question. On a trip to the Lake District, where is Mount Everest? Were you just thinking about Mount Everest one day?
It was actually about 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, really?
I was about 13 or 14 when I was on one of my first ever hill walks, and that inspired the question, really, where is Mount Everest? And it just came out of the blue. And from then on, had this dream, had this vision to stand on the highest point of the world, and that's what's kind of driven me ever since, become a way to overcome adversity by climbing the highest there is, and it went from there, really.
I mean, climbing Mount Everest is often used as a metaphorical thing for people going on difficult journeys, and it's probably fair to say you've had your own sort of challenges in life. We talk about mental health conditions, but you had an early diagnosis of epilepsy, which had a knock-on effect. So just tell us about how old you were when epilepsy was diagnosed.
Well, I was really fortunate that it was only a very mild form, but it was actually everything that caused that really held me back. I was about 9 years old, I think, and it wasn't so much the epilepsy. I mean, that was a terrifying thing for a young person to go through, and left me a nervous wreck and stole my confidence and my self-esteem. But actually, it was the anxiety, it was my stammering. I mean, I've had a speech problem since I've been about 3 or 4 years old. Sometimes it can be so bad that I can't produce a single word. I've smashed up phones in my house through the frustration of not being able to say my own name. Yet now I'm an inspirational speaker and speak to 500 people, but I'll come on to that later. And the bullying, for being different, stole my confidence even more. And so in many ways you might have thought that I was born to fail. I certainly did. I didn't have any real drive to achieve. I was the kid that came last at sports day, and all these things together made me a pretty unlikely prospect for Everest, really.
I mean, epilepsy, it's a condition which a lot of people live with, but then as a 9-year-old having to deal with it, how was it almost sold to you about what was wrong, what your possibilities were, what could happen? Because it sounds as if you were almost quite fearful about what it could potentially mean to your life.
At that age, you're kind of too young to understand, and I was lucky that it was brought under control quite quickly, whereas I know some people deal with it much, much worse. But for me, I've not had a seizure now for over, probably 12, 13 years, which I'm very, very fortunate for. But at the time, it was all the hospital appointments, it was the scans and things, and it's no wonder I was having panic attacks and things, and at that sort of age is pretty crucial. And it's never really gone away, although I've not had seizures, the anxiety aspects and everything, and my fear of hospitals is still very much there. But really, it's a combination of things as a result that still live with me now and have actually been the driver behind what I've done since.
So you've got a diagnosis of epilepsy, then you have sort of the fears and the anxieties that come around that. How did those issues play out in those early years, presumably even pre-teen years, before you're at the age of 13? How did it play out in terms of how you saw yourself within society, how you saw yourself within yourself?
Struggled to fit in, but didn't really have the confidence to stand out and be myself like I am now. And at the time, it was just a pretty unsettling experience. I mean, things got better, but as you get into high school, then the bullying kicks in. And pretty much until the day I left school, actually, I left sixth form 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And in that time, for a long time, wasn't really aiming high at all. And I guess what was the life-changing moment? I mean, well, before I come on to that, even started to cycle to school just to avoid the bullies and the school bus, to then have my tyre slashed, to be spat on, to have bottles thrown at me, and all these things. And it was no wonder I didn't have a great deal of confidence, wasn't really good at anything, was hopeless at sports. And that was when I found the outdoors by chance with that hill walk. Prior to that, I tried paragliding on holiday, and I don't know where that urge really came from, but was kind of a catalyst for realising for the first time that actually I can overcome anything. And I didn't want to just be like everybody else. I wanted to follow my own path and really achieve as much as I possibly can. And as I found the outdoors, I found my escape. I found my way to really prove myself wrong, to prove the bullies wrong.
What do you think that's something to do with? I don't know how sort of humans as animals exist. That you get to those teenage years where you try and push the boundary, and actually, as you said, with you randomly try paragliding on a holiday in Turkey. There was something in you going, try something different. Look beyond where you're at, because there are some people who might have issues of depression or anxiety in their 20s and 30s and feel so stuck in their ways that they can't break out of the cycle that you're in. But there was something about your teenage years that thought, you know what? Let's give this a go. I think
at that young age, yes, I was certainly more open to doing things. I mean, especially as confidence grew as I got older. The depression and anxiety was worse as I got older. It didn't actually properly strike until I was about 17. Actually, prior to that, it was pure anxiety issues, and so confidence just grew and grew from there. I think it's a case of taking steps. I mean, my first challenge was just kind of that first realisation, and then after then, I kind of had this drive just to find out what else I could overcome. And so it was trying more and more things, and trying rock climbing and scuba diving and mountain biking, and suddenly finding a passion. I think finding a passion is absolutely key, and a lot of young people kind of don't really realise what their purpose is in life. Whereas I was lucky to find mine quite early on. And so I can completely understand how people who have mental health issues may struggle to find that get up and go, that drive to try something new. But I think I was very lucky at a young and impressionable age to find that answer, that I just needed to push myself outside of my comfort zone, and learning that doing that was such a rewarding and a life-changing thing.
What were those periods of depression like for you? What was your experience of it?
So this was before Everest actually happened. After climbing Mont Blanc, that was my first sort of step towards climbing Everest.
Age?
17. Prior to that, I'd only done UK hill walking and climbing, and I realised I needed to start getting a little bit higher, Everest being the highest there is. And so it was after Mont Blanc, I carried the Olympic torch in Chester, and I'd had this year of excitement, and getting to carry the torch for my charity fundraising at the time was a real proof that by having the courage to actually not try and fit in, not to be conventional with all my peers at school, it was the reward and proof that I needed to know that I had to keep on doing what I was doing. And so I had this year of excitement and buzz, and then suddenly when that died down, at perfect timing, I got injured whilst I was running, and running became a massive passion for me, and it is now. That's why I kind of walked up the stairs before absolutely hobbling. But then I got injured and couldn't run for over a year. And it seems silly, but when you find this passion, this frustration, then you can't do it. And so I kind of lost my escape. It was almost back where I started, and for the first time, things were taken out of my control. And anybody who's an athlete who gets injured will know a bit about how that feels. You're like a bear with a sore head. But for me, that frustration and being told I may never train again, let alone train to climb the world's highest mountain, was unbearable. And I sank further and further into depression and anxiety, and it was the first time I'd actually suffered something so low, and it knocked me for 6. And yeah, that was a very difficult period of about 6 months. I think once the Olympic torch and all those opportunities had died down, I was kind of stuck for something to do. And it wasn't until I actually had to really change my approach to actually give myself hope that I was going to overcome that, like everything else. And actually having that illness, having that period was a crucial part of the Everest journey, because in that time I realised I needed to give myself a new focus just to get me out of bed every day, because at times it was that bad. And I then decided that 2014 was going to be the year that I stepped on Everest, giving me just 18 months to make it happen, to do all the extra training, to do all the fundraising. But having that focus, basically the next day I got out of bed like a new person. And if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have gone to Everest in 2014. So
it almost wasn't Everest, it was the idea of Everest. It was just the idea was enough to get you out of bed, even though you hadn't worked out presumably all the facts and stats of how you'd fly over there, how you'd actually. It was just the idea of creating a challenge for yourself.
Over the time, I've been learning of as many people as I could, getting a realistic idea of what I was aiming for. I mean, Everest is no playground, and I knew what I'd have to do, but it was almost actually committing myself to finally doing it, to saying, okay, these are the steps I've got to take. I've got to raise this much money by myself, off my own back. I don't know how I'll do it, but I will find a way or make one. And it was having that commitment, actually getting this feeling of goosebumps on my arms by looking at a photo. In the same way that I had done all those years earlier as this excited school kid with this idea of climbing Everest one day. I think a dream becomes a goal when you actually set the date. And it was actually reading a book by Bear Grylls, and this is why I'm so proud to have his name endorsed in my book, because he broke his back just 18 months before he climbed Everest at 23. And it kind of gave me hope that if he could overcome that, I could overcome my injury. And that was what kind of gave me that hope to carry on. And sure enough, a few months later, I was back to training. And 4 or 5 years down the line, I'm back and running again. I'm entering half marathons. I'm loving my training and realising back then it wasn't as bad as it felt at the time. But realising that all these obstacles are just there to help us get to where we need to be.
We talk about obstacles there. So, the depression thing's an interesting one, given that what you've gone through in those very, very early years, you're a quote normal kid. Suddenly, you're epileptic, and then you're at high school. You're dealing with the stammer, so you're dealing with the bullies, and then you suddenly find yourself with a run of either good luck or well positioned yourself to do all those exciting things with the getting involved in activities, torch holder for the London 2012 games. You get, and then there's an injury. And so it's almost like all the key points along the way. You almost get like the yin and the yang, the good and the bad from each of them. That point where you then go, right, I'm going to set the challenge. Was that the point where you're almost trying to break the cycle of the bad luck?
Good question. I think every obstacle is there as a test. It's almost a test of how much you want it. And at times when I've been so close to giving up, the biggest breakthrough has been around the corner. I think for me, all these obstacles have actually been a pretty key part of the journey to actually give me a chance to learn from it and come back stronger every time. So, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think it's more a case of like I have with depression, with all these challenges. It's being able just to come back stronger every time. To me, the only failure is not trying again. And almost, yeah, it goes back to the early days of struggling at school, being picked on, having to throw phones across the room because I can't say my own name, hiding in the toilets at school because I can't, because I'm scared of speaking in class and all these things. It's a way of just fighting back, really. I would say that. And Everest at the time was the answer for me.
It's an incredible story. It involves you writing a book, but more importantly, it involves you actually going to Everest. And if people think that that's like the end of the story, or that's the end of the goal, they're wrong, because in many ways
that's more.
That's just like the next chapter, isn't it? In terms of the date came around for Everest, and you've had 2 attempts at Everest, and people will have watched documentaries about this sort of stuff. It's one of the most dangerous things you can ever try to do, and you had unfortunate experiences out there with your party who went with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, people know Everest as the ultimate challenge, and first thing I'll say is actually mental illness is actually the hardest challenge I've ever dealt with, and it never really goes away, but I'll come on to that in a minute. With Everest, I got there for the first time in 2014 at 18, and this was after doing a 7,000 metre peak the year before in training. Now, this was only a few months after my injury and the depression, and coming back to be on an expedition just a few months later, and raise the money from corporate sponsorship, which was a challenge in itself, especially with a stammer. And then on the expedition, there was a huge avalanche in the Icefall. A day before we got to base camp, tragically, 16 people died. So we had to pack up and go home without stepping a foot on the mountain. But every obstacle becomes an opportunity in disguise. It took a year to raise money for the people in Nepal, also doing more challenges to get myself mentally and physically more prepared. And then 2015, what could possibly go wrong? But we were on the mountain itself, this time at 19 years old, when the Nepal earthquake hit, and quite literally shook the mountain to the core. We were in the Icefall. We got hit by a big blast of powder for the first time in my life, thinking, "This is it. This is how we die." And then,
presumably having seen almost very similar thing the year before.
The year before was very different. I mean, we didn't see any of the fallout of that, but this time we were in the thick of it, and it was just the most sickening, horrible feeling of fear I could ever possibly describe. And I guess that's why my book is called Icefall. It just talks about how life can come crashing down. We then were stuck on the mountain for 2 days with aftershocks chucking snow at us every half an hour, and that's when you really realise what's important in life. And we got down to base camp 2 days later to find absolute carnage. 3 of our team had sadly died at base camp. 22 people lost their lives in total at base camp, and of course 9,000 more across the whole country. So considering the damage at base camp, our tents being buried under a foot of ice, had we not been on the mountain, had we not left just 5 hours earlier that morning, the chances are most of our team, myself included, would not be here right now. And so for once, obstacles were completely out of my control, and it was a completely different type of adversity to overcome.
So what height did you get to? Well, what height do you, because you never really got to really get going on your Everest challenges, but you weren't at sea level by any stretch, were you?
No, I mean, base camp is 5,300 metres. We were at Camp 1, which is the highest I've been on Everest, at 6,050 metres. So higher than the top of Kilimanjaro. We're camping higher than that, which is interesting. So no, we only got to the first camp, and obviously when we got down, everything was gone. So that was that. I have recently been to 7,000 metres on the 6th highest peak in the world. That's called Choayu, which is in Tibet. Last autumn, went there for 6 weeks. I didn't reach the top of that either, would you believe, due to altitude sickness. But I have been to 7,100 metres before.
It's an unbelievable story. Every time you go up a challenge, you face, adversity, you face tragedy, but at no point are you saying, oof, it's probably not for me, this. I've had 2 lucky breaks there, or 2 lucky escapes. I'm going to, just go and get myself a nice little job somewhere in Cheshire where you're from. At each point, you get hit back and you step forward. Now, the guy who had, the depression battle or the anxiety battle, is that guy still in there?
He is, yeah. I mean,
what's he telling you to do?
This journey has become so much more than just a mountain. And for me, I mean, my stammer's still there, but I've managed to control that better. And with that, I'm basically now my job has gone away from the days of washing pots in the local kitchen to actually being an inspirational speaker. I speak all over the country, to schools, to corporate audiences, and share my story. And for me, that's an incredible gift to have. And with my book and ambassador roles, and that as well, it's become a career as well. So, as I said, now it's become so much more than just Everest. But for me, the mental health challenges are still very much there, because they never really go away. They become part of you, and I just find ways to deal with them. The outdoors for me is a way of dealing with them. And I want to get the message out there that mental illness is not a sign of weakness, because you might see all the challenges that I've done, and even though I haven't climbed Everest, the other endurance things is a feat of strength, but I'm just a normal person. And despite this, I still face my mental health challenges, sometimes on a day-by-day basis. Even last year, I entered a half marathon, and I was in such a bad place mentally that I just gave up and walked home. Yet I've been known to actually head out on marathons on my own just because I feel like it. So it just shows that actually mental illness is not a sign of weakness. I'm just finding ways to share that story, and I hope I can keep on doing that with my writing and my book and my next challenge.
Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
It's Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Very special guest in the studio, Alex Staniforth. He's from Cheshire, and as we've been hearing, he's had an incredible story. He tells his story, by the way, in full on his website, alexstaniforth.com. Staniforth, as you'd imagine, it's spelt probably, although have a good guess in your search engines.
People can't spell it. It's interesting.
And it just, well, if you just type it, like even with a few letters missing, it generally comes up on Google.
Or
so
type in
we'll
Icefall, even better.
Icefall is the name of your the book that you wrote. Is the book an autobiography? You know, people say people are too young to tell an autobiography, but you obviously felt there was a story there to tell.
There's definitely a story there. It's not your typical Everest book, and actually, funnily enough, I start the book by saying how my dad always told me not to, how he doesn't understand how famous people can write books at a young age because they haven't even lived their lives yet, and I'm not a famous person, but there I am writing mine I was 19 at the time. But age has never defined me. Everyone has a story to tell.
When you consider, you talked about your ongoing mental health issues, when you start writing a book, obviously you're drawn to mind to relive certain moments in your life, to rethink them through. Did you find that like a cathartic process? Did you find it helpful in terms of how you were writing it? Did you think differently? Or for some, and you think about some of the issues you faced, there might have been, traumatic moments that you forced yourself to re-go through.
I think a lot of mental illness can be caused by, kind of a post-trauma type thing. And for me, it wasn't so much that, but it was definitely a tonic for me to be able to do it. I mean, as always, I just throw myself into something else. And after Everest, I was training for a fundraising challenge for Nepal and just keeping myself busy. But getting it on paper, actually, I didn't find it difficult. I mean, even speaking about it, I don't find it difficult because, I mean, yeah, it was a pretty traumatic experience to go through it at that age, but it could have been worse. And I think it is what it is. You just have to grow from it. And getting it on paper, yes, it helped me to accept it. And now I just use it as a driver. I mean, we shouldn't be here, but we are, and we have to use that to the best possible. But this is why mental health isn't a case of, manning up or just, being tough, because it affects people who you might not expect it to. And I don't think it really changed anything on that front. The issues are still there, but it's just about changing your thought process. Is there a voice in your head at all, maybe before you go and speak in front of an organisation or a particular industry? You're a young guy, inspirational speaker, and they're asking you to basically inspire their workforce. Is there a voice in your head which is saying to you, you're just a kid, you're only just getting started, should you really be, are you really the right person to inspire these people? Is there like doubt that still sits on your mind? Still a lot of doubt, and I mean, I'm better than what I used to be, but I am my own worst enemy in that sense, and having to really, remind myself of where I've been, and for me, it's still really hard to accept that, I'm getting paid to speak to people. I mean, I'm just myself, and I am just a kid, and I make that clear in my talks. I mean, I'm not a businessman. I'm not a climber. I failed lots of times, but actually, failure is what's helped me to succeed. And just having that ability to keep getting back on my feet and kind of prove to people that whatever challenge they're facing in life, whatever that may be, that they can overcome it, really. How do you personally define success now? Because you talked about, your challenges, your two Everest challenges didn't quite, almost get off the ground, if you like. You didn't achieve what you set out to achieve, but you still see that as a success because, you got over there, you set the target, and it wasn't to be for whatever reason. Really interesting question. I'm actually writing a blog on this at the moment, which I gave up on last week. I think success means something different to everybody. To me, success isn't about having a lot of money. It's not about having a nice car, having a nice house. If that is something great, but for me, it's about how we respond to adversity. It's how we come back stronger from challenges. And what happened at Everest wasn't in my control. There's nothing I could have done differently. There's been many things where it's been my error. But I think it's the ability to accept that things don't always go to plan. and it's being able to take those risks and embrace failure, not to be afraid of failure. My story's never been about convention. I've always tried to challenge the norm and just achieve as much as I can, and you get a lot of skepticism. I have to not only challenge my own doubts, but other people doubted me. But I think for me, the ability to rise back stronger from challenges, to me, is what success is about.
There's a great line in, is it Rocky Balboa? Where it ain't how hard you hit. This is what life is about. It ain't how hard you hit, it's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward.
I like the one by Bruce Lee, to hell with obstacles, I create opportunities. And every chapter of my book starts with a quote for that reason. Experience is the best teacher, and especially adversity, we learn a lot more from that. And I think in a lot of young people, they're afraid of failure. And so when things don't go to plan, if they don't get the grades or what have you, then they start to believe they're a failure. And I went against everything at school. I found my vision, and I think stubbornness stopped me listening to that around me, and I'm very lucky to be where I am now, really.
And I guess as well, Everest hasn't worked out for you so far. I imagine there's going to be maybe a future trip out there at some point. But in terms of the inspiration, you could say, right, well, epilepsy, I'm living with that. Bullying, I beat that. Mental health illness, I'm living with that as well. So even if you discount, the climbing and you discount the physical challenges, there's three things which instantly people can associate with, health conditions and mental health conditions and the terrible stigma that comes around being bullied as well. So even if you never step up a ladder ever again, you've always got that in your arsenal, if you like.
Yeah, for me, I've never really feel like I've achieved enough. I don't know when I'll get to that point, but for me to be able to make a positive difference, I think, is what drives me, and I hope to continue doing that for a long time.
Tell us about your next challenge. So you're going to be UK based for this one, and you're fundraising for it too.
Yeah, this one's very different actually. My mum will be glad to know. Everest isn't off the cards forever. I mean, I'm too young to say that, but I wanted to change my direction. And after my last trip on Choa, I realised that I wanted to do something closer to home. So my next project, Climb the UK, will be starting actually during Mental Health Week in May this year. And we'll be fundraising for Young Minds UK, the mental health charity. So this one involves climbing to the highest point of every county in the UK in one push. So this will be a combination of cycling, running, even kayaking to the highest point of every county in England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. So this should take me about 2 months. I'm looking at about 4,000 to 5,000 miles at present, and I really want it to engage every corner of the UK, getting people out, enjoying the outdoors. And for some people with mental health challenges, even getting out of bed can be their Everest. I mean, I know, I've been there. And so I just want to get the message out there that mental illness is not a sign of weakness. It's not about, it's not about being mentally tough. It's showing that everybody deals with these things. Hopefully raising as much money as I can and engaging as many people as I can in every corner of the country, really.
On a really good day, you can see the top of Snowdon, but it's a little bit hazy today. And on an even better day, you can see the top of Scafell. There's two good starting points, but there's a lot of counties in between to get your feet around.
There's 100, actually, yes. I mean, the highest in Merseyside is Billinge Hill, which isn't particularly high. Probably see that from here as well.
Yeah.
So, obviously, some of them aren't very high. You've got the highest parts of Scotland and the Munros, and you've got the Orkney and Shetland Islands. So you've got a mix of everything. It's a real adventure, but I'm really excited about it and would really like people to follow my journey and be part of that, really.
AlexStaniforth.com is the website where you can get all the information, and presumably that's got links to your social media.
Yeah, Twitter,
like
Instagram, Facebook and all that.
Everyone's got a website, but then it always ends up going on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
It does. That's an age thing. But I think also if anybody, whilst I'm passing, if people can't actually be on the walks or on the runs or on the bike rides, I mean, anybody who's got any biscuit supply would also be highly appreciated.
Brilliant stuff.
As I'm passing.
Absolute inspiration. Alex, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you joining us on Mental Health Monday, and hopefully we'll catch up again very soon. We wish you all the best with the challenge. The website, we'll get a link on our social media, and the show will be available as well with the Mental Health Monday podcast, and we'll supply the link through our social media at Radio City Talk. AlexStaniforth.com. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Mick Coyle. Mental Health Monday back next Monday, live on Radio City Talk from 2:15. Also available as a podcast via audioboom.com and iTunes.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
This is Radio City Talk.